This is Just Zach Ansbury Show.
This is also sort of where being a scientist has helped me in my career, is that, I've sort of had the Ehrenberg-Bass approach to learning about marketing, but without the thousands of categories. I have only a few examples, but there are some things that I've observed in my career that I've observed like over and over again. And whether it's been me that made the mistake, or maybe that's a too harsh a term, maybe I did something that didn't work as well, or that did work well, and I see somebody else has done the same thing with the same results, kind of something clicks in my head and says, well, maybe there's a reason for that why both of these things didn't work. And here's the common factor. And so, I didn't know Ehrenberg-Bass existed for a long time, even though it was around for probably most of my marketing career. And I was on my own island, being my own little marketing scientist as I accumulated knowledge, And so when the book came out, I was like, yeah, I get that. I've seen that. Oh, now someone's put it into some words that explain it to me. It was a revelation, and it was interesting because I learned a lot, but it also confirmed a lot for me, that stuff that I already knew that I didn't know was like a marketing law.
You weren't alone after all.
Pardon me?
It turns out that you weren't alone after all.
That's true. Exactly.
There's this group.
I didn't know I had allies, but you were all halfway across the world.
Yeah, completely different time zones in a little city that you probably hadn't heard of before. Yeah.
No, well, we were introduced to the concepts of the Ehrenberg-Bass Institute and also Mountain View Learning, which I know that you guys work closely with Thomas Paine. But we about 5 years ago, our VP of Market Research signed us up as sponsors to the Institute and brought a lot of learning. And not only have I been involved in learning the stuff, but I've been teaching it as well in internal seminars. In fact, some of the time I spent at the Institute was helping refine our teaching materials and bringing them more up to date with sort of latest thinking, that we had going on in the Institute, and also bringing more of the laws into play and how we're teaching this. Because I think that was, we kind of framed up the laws of growth in terms of overcoming barriers to penetration. And we ended up skipping over a lot of important concepts like duplication of purchase and those kinds of things that really matter in terms of how you develop marketing strategy. So I think the next time we teach this course, we're going to have a much bigger impact on the organization, or so I hope.
Okay, so this is a course that you run internally?
Yes, yeah. I mean, we basically take the principles, and the idea is to teach people some of the basics of how people shop, and if people are doing system one shopping, meaning that they're just on autopilot, not really looking at labels, they just walk into the store buying what they usually buy. How do you get noticed at shelf? How do you make sure that if you're being noticed at shelf, that if you do a packaging change, that you continue to be noticed at shelf? Because sometimes we can make a change that's too radical and people can't see us even when they're looking right at us. So those are the kind of things that we try to teach to people, so that consumers will buy our products when it's time for them to need them, and how to keep them top of mind. And so we've taken the laws of growth and we've probably taken them one step too far, I think, in our original teaching, and that maybe we didn't lay that groundwork of here's the laws of growth. This is all category buyers are light buyers. This is why you need to target the category. So we kind of say it as a fact without kind of explaining why. So I feel like what we're going to have now is going to lay a better groundwork for how you overcome a barrier to penetration using the principles that we teach from Ehrenberg-Bass.
Perfect. Yeah, that sounds like something that you should definitely do, and something that you should continuously do as well, because, you have staff turnover, or it's always good to just remind people that these core principles about how consumers behave exist, and they have forever existed.
And that is a big that's a big challenge for us, because we have, our marketing organization turns over very quickly. This is true probably everywhere in the U.S. I mean, you heard me talk about my career. I was at Nabisco, Campbell's, Nabisco, Sara Lee, Irving Tissue, Sara Lee, SCJ, right? I've been doing this for about a little less than 30 years, and I've had like 7 companies, or something like that. If I count, and I was with two of them twice. So, people do move around a lot in marketing organizations. And they rotate from brand to brand a lot. And in a company like ours, which is big, we have, multiple divisions. We have a home cleaning division. We have a pest control division. We have an air care division. And as people move between them, I'm supporting home cleaning. We may not have a uniform training across all the divisions. So the person who's in my role in air care may not be training people to the same extent that I am in home cleaning. So I get someone who's never heard of this stuff coming in. Yeah. And this is not a criticism of our organization or that person. It's just the way things work in terms of how people approach their jobs and the things that they do. Or we haven't had training for 18 months, and this person was hired 17 months ago. They've been on the job quite a long time, and they haven't had an opportunity to be trained. So I do an awful lot of one-on-one training of marketers by sort of telling them, this is how the world really works. And a lot of times they find it surprising. But it's, definitely rewarding. I think, I've always thought that one of my main job functions is helping train junior marketers.
So from what you've been saying, it actually kind of matches to, my experience with sort of the other corporate sponsors of the Ehrenberg-Bass Institute, having seen people move between roles generally around 2 to 3 years, whether it's internally. So, they might move from a certain part of the organization to a different part in their marketing team, or they might move to different brands, or they might move even to different categories. So that seems to match up with my experience for sure. When you're teaching new people, so, you mentioned you have people come in and you have these one-on-one sort of training sessions, and they're quite surprised about what you are telling them. Did you want to run through, I guess, what they find the most surprising and how you overcome any kind of initial resistance or hesitation? Or, if you've been doing something a certain way for 10 years and someone all of a sudden tells you that you're not doing it the right way, how do you approach that? How do you sort of overcome that hurdle?
Well, I think it depends on the situation. Certainly you have more difficulty with more senior people because the senior people got to be senior people by being perceived by the organization as being successful. So they've done things that have rewarded them. And so they're the ones that are going to be the biggest challenge because they have because they have a foundation of what they think are successful things. And if you go to them and say, well, that's not really how the world works, then you're going to get a lot of pushback, right? So that's one where it's a little more difficult. I think that, they tend to take more time and you have to be more consistent. You just have to be consistent in your approach to well, this is why we're seeing this, right? This is what we've been talking about, right? This is, you're not getting the result you expect because you shouldn't have expected it. So those are and I think that what I've tried to do in everything I do is basically you have to have if you're like a sort of giving people data-based recommendations, you have to show that you have a ton of integrity, right? That what you're doing, that you're not coming with an agenda of some kind. And I once had a very difficult person I was dealing with, and we were butting heads on stuff. And finally, I took him aside one day and I said, listen, I said, you and I are not getting along and you're not listening to me. I said, what you need to understand is that my one job is to make you successful. I said, and that's what I'm trying to do. I said, and you're not listening to me because you think I'm wrong. I said, but I have a lot of experience in this area, and I'm telling you the stuff that I strongly believe is going to make you successful. And that really got his attention. And he started adopting, not every recommendation, right? But he started listening. He would challenge. We started having the conversations that you and I have, when we're talking about stuff. Like I would say, well, here's why you should do this. And he'd be, why? And we'd talk about it. And if he was skeptical, he would tell me skeptical. But we had these honest conversations about stuff. And I was able to go and say, well, he would say, we're going to do this. And I would say, well, I don't agree with that. And he goes, well, I know you don't. And he knew why I didn't agree, but he had his reasons for doing something. So we ended up with a much better relationship, and we moved the business forward. And actually his division was, really was the star division in this latest fiscal year. And a lot of it was due to the fact that he started taking some of the recommendations I had that were based on the laws of growth. And so, I don't think he'll ever forget, the conversation I had with him. Younger people are easier because I'm a baby boomer and I'm dealing with millennials. What I don't want to do is I don't want to be the old guy who says, oh, we tried that and that didn't work, because then you're just the crotchety old grumpy guy and they're not going to come talk to you. And, the approach I take with that group, and particularly the more junior people right out of business school, even interns, is I'll say to them, like if they're coming to me and say, my job is to do this. And I know it's like a silly job, right? Because someone who didn't understand principles gave them this job. Yeah. Like I'm going to source volume from people who use natural products or something, right? And I would say, well, we have some new learning on that, right? Or I'll say, well, that's probably too narrow a target. And let me explain why. So rather than saying, that's just too narrow a target, that's not going to work, right? It becomes a teaching opportunity, right? You say, well, I think that target might be a little narrow, and here's why. And then you can show them something like, people who buy naturals are, or all demographic groups buy naturals, or whatever, right? So you can sort of say, if you just focus on this really small group of people, you're going to miss a whole bunch of people who will buy your product, and you're going to limit your growth. So then they've learned a valuable marketing lesson from that, and so they're kind of grateful for that, and they're more likely to come back for more advice and more help because not only did you give them some good advice, but you explained why this advice is good, and that's been a very successful approach. Now, you don't get everybody. There's some people you talk to and they reject. And, you just sort of, move on. And you can't help people who don't want to be helped.
Yeah, that's right. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Right, exactly.
Okay. So you find that if you take that really helpful approach, that you explain to them what they're setting out to do, is not necessarily a bad thing, but that they're going about achieving their growth for their brand the wrong kind of way. And so long as you're showing them evidence and, real world, empirical evidence as to why that's not a good case, they tend to be less hesitant, or they tend to be a bit more accepting.
Yes, exactly. And then once they realize that you're starting to unlock the keys to the kingdom for them, they'll come back for more.